Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yishra Hawkins. Well, Katan, in the news today, we're going to talk a lot about the Delta variant and the Delta Plus. Now that is kind of an offshoot there of that original Delta variant strain of the coronavirus. That one really has a lot of the scientists and the doctors worried about how far that variant there is going to go. Also, we have Russia doing some more military drills, war games, and we saw in the news that the British Navy went into the waters near Crimea, which controlled by Russia, so that ended up being a little bit of skirmish there between those two nations. So we'll have those details, but first we're going to talk about the drought that we've mentioned in several broadcasts that is gripping the West, and now it's even getting worse. So the extreme drought is really starting to impact life in the western states. The agricultural industry in California in particular is facing some very tough times. Now, government officials in the state are warning they might have to cut back the water supplied to farmers to grow their crops. Now, this warning isn't an idle threat, however. The State Water Resources Board contacted 6,600 farmers this week to tell them they could see further cutbacks.
Wow. Anya Rodenbaugh, CEO of Western United Dairymen, told a reporter from ABC 23 Local News, quote, essentially, if you don't have a well, you're really going to be facing some hard times. We've already seen about 15% of our workforce severely impacted by this drought, end quote. Irrigation supplies have already been cut off at the federal and state levels, which has left farmers with no other choice but to let their land go fallow, which means that, of course, they can't plant it.
Bruce Blodgett of the San Joaquin Farms Bureau also talked to ABC 23 News, explaining the dire situation, saying, quote, if you have orchards or vineyards and you're told to cut back your water, you're essentially killing that orchard or vineyard. Blodgett adds, some people can make planning decisions if they get this notice in time to not plant certain crops, but for those who have permanent crops, this could be devastating. Now, he also said the water cutoffs could put smaller farmers completely out of business, reducing revenues to the state as well. So, as you see there, another situation of the ripple effect, not just going to affect the farmers, they're going to be the first ones down the line, so to speak, but then affect the state, of course, the those in the state, and then the all the areas that are supplied by those crops.
And then, of course, the reduced amount of food that's available to everyone to eat. So that's kind of a thing that also is taken into consideration in this as well. Well, California officials say the cutoffs could last all the way until winter arrives. Well, in the meantime, farmers are trying to do what they can to prevent their crops from total devastation by using recycled water. And as the saying goes, desperate times call for desperate measures.
Well, now to the pandemic. We've talked a lot about the Delta virus in recent reports, and now the United States is seeing a new surge directly linked to the variant. The CDC director is pointing to the unvaccinated as being the greatest threat to everyone, saying as long as there are Americans who are not vaccinated, COVID-19 will remain a threat. Now, the CDC reports that 20.6% of all new infections are found to be the Delta variant.
And we know health experts are saying this mutation of coronavirus is considered to be more dangerous and more deadly. One former FDA commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, told CBS Evening News, quote, people who get this virus might have higher viral loads for longer periods of time, so they shed more virus.
Now, doctors are saying children under the age of 12 are most vulnerable because they are not even eligible to get the vaccine. Doctors are pushing to get the American public educated on inoculations to help them readily accept the vaccines so children can return to school this coming fall.
Well, studies have found that Pfizer vaccine is 88% effective in protecting against the Delta variant after the second shot has been administered, but just 33.5% effective in those who have only received one dose. The state of Missouri is leading the nation in new infections per capita right now, and hospitals are being overwhelmed with new patients. Craig McCoy, the CEO of Mercy Health, says it's a lot younger population and a lot sicker population. Well, Mercy Health is the 5th largest Catholic health care system in the country and has its headquarters in St. Louis, Missouri.
Dr. Sam Alexander, an emergency medical physician at Cox Health in Springfield, Missouri, told CBS Evening News, quote, this upswing is going to cause deaths. There's going to be people you know that are going to die because you were not vaccinated. So you can see, Catan, they're really pushing. The doctors now are really starting to push for people to get that shot. Next to Missouri comes Colorado with the second largest number of Delta variant cases in the U.S. According to health officials, 40% of COVID cases there are known to be that Delta mutation. That was the one that when it first came out, they were really worried about it, you know, being much more contagious and leading to a lot more deaths.
Right. Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci agrees this variant is spreading faster than the original virus and is the biggest threat when it comes to putting an end to the pandemic. Well, the White House has just announced that they will fall short of their goal to give at least one dose of the vaccine to 70% of all Americans adults by the 4th of July. Well, Dr. Fauci says they could make that goal, but a few weeks later.
Well, according to the CDC, almost 169 million adults have had at least one shot, which is about 65% of Americans 18 years and older. Now, the White House adds that with Americans 30 and above, they've actually reached the 70% mark. However, it's the youngest adults, the 18 to 29-year-olds, they are having trouble convincing to get the vaccine. Now, officials would like this age group in particular to take the Delta variant seriously, pointing out the number of cases has doubled in the U.S. in only 2 weeks' time.
Interesting. Dr. Fauci is calling the 70% goal aspirational and says, quote, that's not the goal line, that's the aspirational goal. The goal line is to completely crush this outbreak. So no one should think that when we reach 70% across the country that we're done.
But some are firm in their choice to not get vaccinated, including healthcare workers in the Houston Methodist healthcare system. There, 153 employees have either resigned or been fired from their jobs because they refused vaccinations. Now, with U.S. officials saying we need to fight back against the rapidly spreading Delta variant that is doubling every 2 weeks and accounts for 20% of all cases nationwide, there is low tolerance for those who are not wanting to get their shot. So they're really looking at the unvaccinated and now starting to really kind of punish them, if you would, causing, they got rid of those. Some of them resigned, the others lost their jobs.
Yeah, and it seems like, kind of if history can tell us a story that, people who choose not to get vaccinated are going to start to be the cause of future infections and problems that come as a result of coronavirus continuing to mutate and spread because they're choosing not to get vaccinated. So having someone to blame will kind of ease the public's conscience, so to speak.
Right.
Well, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky reiterated the importance of getting vaccinated to stop the spread of infections. The Delta variant has been detected in at least 47 states and is responsible for almost half of all infections from Iowa to Colorado. Well, Missouri is hardest hit right now, some believing it's due to largely the low rate of vaccinations in their state.
Well, some, like Florida Pastor Marcel Davis, are getting desperate to persuade people to get their COVID shots. Pastor Davis is going house to house talking to people in an attempt to convince them to get the shot. Well, back in Houston, one would think that letting over 150 medical staff go would be a huge blow with a pandemic going on, but the hospital system there in Houston has 26,000 employees, so this really is just a tiny fraction they're willing to lose to push everyone else to get vaccinated.
And seemingly to make that point that if you don't get vaccinated, well, you don't have a job.
Right, make an example out of them.
That's right. Why are health experts convinced the vaccine is the way to go? Well, largely they are basing this belief on a study from the United Kingdom where they found that if you got both doses of the vaccine, there was a 96% reduction in hospitalizations from the Delta variant. Now, that doesn't mean people didn't get the virus. It just means they were not as sick and didn't need to be hospitalized.
Well, in a recent interview, ABC News medical contributor Dr. Todd Ellerin explained the flip side of this. Dr. Ellerin said, the issue, of course, is if you don't get the vaccine, then you're face to face with a highly contagious variant. It's about 40% more contagious than the Alpha variant, the one that was first described in the United Kingdom. And we know that that was more contagious. And we think that there's a twofold risk of hospitalization. So this is just another reason that you really want to go out there and get the vaccine, is what Dr. Todd Ellerin had to say.
Interesting. Well, we're going to turn it over to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has more for us on this Delta Plus variant, an offshoot of the Delta variant, and how it's actually been evading vaccines. Well, we hear that, there's less hospitalizations, but at the same time, hey, this virus is smart enough to evade current vaccines, and also some warnings from the FDA regarding vaccinations and heart inflammation. Larry, what do you have for us?
As honest authorities have acknowledged for some time now, there will be no containing the coronavirus. The newest mutant to instill collective dread into the nations is the Delta variant, which is now mutated into what's being called the Delta Plus. The Delta Plus variant has migrated to and been identified in at least 9 countries so far and infected 200 people. Health officials fear the more infectious strain might produce the next global wave of afflictions, and they are particularly concerned about the fact that the mutation seems to have the knowledge to disarm the effect of certain vaccines and to produce lasting brain damage. It should be obvious to see at this point that the virus and all of its variations are in communication with each other, as can be seen by the manifestation and exchange of various advantageous traits among the mutations. So is the case with the new Delta Plus variant, which is demonstrating the same know-how to elude monoclonal antibodies as was seen in the South African variant, and for that ability, experts fear that present vaccines will not produce the effects which are currently being used to determine success. As labs scramble to test and develop more vaccines, the World Health Organization is acknowledging that the public might likely be faced with the prospect of annual and biannual booster shots. With regard to the shots themselves, however, the FDA is now moving to label vaccines with a warning concerning potential heart inflammation, especially among those who are 30 and under, in a condition which is called myocarditis, which is an inflamed state of the heart muscle itself. While medical professionals have been either slow to recognize or reluctant to admit the connection between coronavirus infection and heart damage, the effect is now being widely acknowledged. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Interesting stories that Larry had. The Delta Plus variant there being doesn't seem to be affected by those who already got the vaccine. So that's going to be a real concern to doctors who are pushing the vaccinations. Right. And then also another side effect, serious side effect, is that heart inflammation that we're seeing in young people. And we just covered that they're trying to push that young age to get vaccinated. So now that coming out is not going to help anyone in that age group or parents to want to get their child vaccinated.
That's correct.
Well, in the Bronx, New York, a 10-year-old girl and her 5-year-old brother had to dive out of the way seeking protection as a gunman chased another person through the street while firing at him. Now, the man running from the gunfire without consideration of the children ran directly into them, not to shield them, but to protect himself from the barrage of bullets. Surveillance video caught the tense moment as it unfolded. Thankfully, the children were unharmed in the crossfire, but the victim was hit 3 times as the gunman unloaded at least a dozen rounds. Now, the victim survived his encounter, but he's not alone in gun violence incidents.
I bet that was very scary for the children.
Absolutely.
Indeed. In Arizona, a gunman going down the highway unleashing a deadly shooting spree left 1 person dead. Last month, multiple people, including a 4-year-old girl, were shot in Times Square after an argument erupted in a gunfight. Gun violence has taken an upward turn since the pandemic began, with more than 4,000 shooting deaths in 2020 as compared to 2019. So many of those, in fact, who were involved in those shootings and those deaths were children. Now, this year, at least 119 children under the age of 11 have been killed, and that does not include suicides, but roughly in that, 300 were wounded as a result. Wow. Yeah, very sad.
Well, Shannon Watts, the founder of Moms Demand Action, spoke to ABC News about stopping gun violence and made the suggestion for funding programs encouraging secure storage of firearms among gun owners to require, that was one of the things, to require that secure gun storage, which a lot of accidents is because the children find the guns, have access to them because they're not locked up properly. Right. But also then they were trying to get gun owners to require the background checks of every single gun sale. So authorities are tackling the challenge of finding ways to combat the rise in gun violence that usually is seen as we enter into the summer months.
Wow. Well, in an effort to combat Iran, the Biden administration took down several Iranian-linked websites as the government said that the sites were connected to spreading disinformation among American voters. Well, this comes in the midst of revived nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran soon after the election of Iran's new hardline president. When users logged onto the suspected sites, they were met with a banner saying that this website has been seized. Sites that were blocked include news sites like English language Press TV, Arabic language Al Alam, and 3 news services run by Hezbollah.
Karim Sajapur with the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, in an interview with CBS this morning, said that the sites were responsible for propagating disinformation, Iranian propaganda, among other things, to sow discord among those in the United States. Now, the new Iranian president, like many other high figures in the country, is under U.S. sanctions. Now, the Department of Justice said that the blocked sites violated those sanctions because they were owned by a U.S. company. Now, Iran responded by calling the move bullying and said the U.S. doesn't believe in freedom of speech.
North Korea's foreign minister has said that talks with the United States will get the country nowhere. Therefore, the country has rejected talks with the United States. Top U.S. negotiators visited South Korea in hopes that the North would respond with agreeing to talks with the United States, which, of course, the United States hopes that the North will give up its nuclear missile program. Sanctions have stalled talks between Washington and Pyongyang, but the U.S. has plans on what to tell the North they should give up in return for lifting those sanctions. And Kim Jong-un said that North Korea needs to prepare for dialogue and confrontation, with the emphasis in that statement on the confrontation part.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, a recent confrontation between the British Navy and Russia as a British ship entered contested waters near Crimea, in which the Russians responded by firing warning shots and conducting flyovers. Now, President Boris Johnson personally ordered the HMS Defender ship to enter those waters against warnings from his cabinet. Now, this has many wondering why it appears the UK is provoking Russia.
Yeah, and let's not forget that that is one of America's top allies there, the United Kingdom.
Right, and remember, President Vladimir Putin recently said it's like everybody's trying to bite us, and we're going to take their teeth out so they can't bite us. So those things have to keep all that in mind, and you have little skirmishes like that, they could very easily and quickly erupt into something very large.
Yes, that's absolutely right there. The U.S. continuously is conducting military drills in various countries that surround U.S. adversaries. Well, some have wondered, what would the U.S. do if those same quote-unquote adversaries were to conduct drills close to the United States and its territories? Well, Russia has done just that by engaging in war exercises in the Pacific, not that far from Hawaii. The Russian military says it was about 300 miles, while the Department of Defense says that satellite imagery shows the vessels being as close as 35 miles off the shores of Hawaii. Now, could these games put United States and Russian dialogue at risk? Well, time will tell.
Well, the U.S. Navy recently detonated a huge underwater explosion to determine if its newest and most advanced aircraft carrier is ready for war. A 40,000-pound explosive was detonated to see if the USS Gerald R. Ford could withstand battle conditions. Now, the explosion was so big that the USGS registered the explosion as a 3.9 magnitude earthquake. Now, after the trials, the ship will return to dry dock to undergo modernization, maintenance, and of course, any repairs needed because of that detonation.
That's right. And you don't think about the casualties in regards to the sea life, that
Right.
obviously probably suffered as a result of a 40,000-pound, explosive just to test the viability, durability of a ship that is preparing not to really save life, but in a lot of cases, as we've reported in many times in the past, those ships, the equipment from the military ends up taking life. Well, seems like all the nations their teeth are set on edge. They're taunting one another. They're preparing for war. And they're not really being educated in any of the ways of peace. And, there's a lot of people who want to make a change, who want to make a difference, but they really don't know which direction to go. If you're one of those who are looking for change and who would actually like to see peace and who would actually like to be educated in morals that will bring peace to your life and to the lives of those around you, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
Well, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas, 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yisraelhawkins.com, or yahwehsbranch.com. Or if you'd like, you could visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@yahweh.com. Any international calls, call the number that's on your screen right now. And if you still haven't checked out these two absolutely free and best Bible study tools on the market, go to YisraelSays.com or AskYisrael.com. Punch in anything in the search and guaranteed to bring up pages and pages of information, scriptural information, that will give you the answers you are seeking.
Well, don't go anywhere. Grab a pencil and paper, and of course, if you do have a Bible or scripture, because up next, a man who is actually going to teach you the way to peace, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for joining us.